SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Barcelona, the industry-leading conference bringing you the future of sports betting and iGaming.
SBC Summit Barcelona is where you can experience the global industry coverage under one roof. Expect an industry-leading conference agenda covering all verticals across 7 stages, a huge trade show floor filled with over 3,000 exhibitors, and luxury networking events at premium venues in one of Europe's coolest cities. Join 10,000 executives this September at the event drawing the industry's eyes. Get your tickets now at sbcevents.com.
Age gating is one of the topics du jour in U.S. sports betting and online gambling, but is it an instance of all action and not enough talk? Massachusetts recently took unprecedented steps around sports betting logos in sports arenas. Meanwhile, across the pond, the UK Advertising Standards Authority said a sportsbook using Jake Paul for engagement was unacceptable given his young audience. But do we even know that all these actions will have an impact? We're going to discuss all that and more on today's episode of iGaming Daily. I'm Jessica Welman, editor of SBC Americas, joined by my senior journalist, Charlie Horner, on a Monday. So we're changing things up today, Charlie. I hope that's all right.
Yeah, a little bit different, but a nice way to start the week. I must just mention for listeners, there are builders right outside the window. So if you do hear the odd bang, we apologise in advance.
Yeah, no, Charlie's actually just covering for him throwing things at anger as we discuss some, I'm going to call it questionable choices. And we're going to start with Massachusetts, which has been a new player in sports betting since it only launched this year, but one that we seem to talk about quite a bit because they are very, very committed to making sure that what they are doing is above board, that what they are doing is in line with the latest we know about responsible gambling. But what they did last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, was a bridge too far, some might say. So essentially the new rule is if you are a sportsbook sign or a logo that you see in a sporting venue in Massachusetts, we'll use Fenway Park as the example. BetMGM has its logo on the big green monster, the outfield wall. That logo now needs to say at the bottom for 21 and up. And that is essentially what the new rule is. If it's in a sporting venue, you need to have these age gating notes at the bottom of it. Charlie, first impressions of this. I've already kind of tipped my hand about how I feel about it, but am I out of line?
I don't think you're out of line at all, really. I mean, this is unique. I don't think we've seen this in any other US state. And yeah, I mean, I just wonder about the efficacy of whether this is going to have any material impact on problem gambling numbers or the exposure of minors to betting activity, to be honest. I mean, I guess we'll see. They might produce a report later down the line, but I question whether having a 21 plus sign next to your logo is going to make any material impact, or whether it's just a bit of a little signal of,
yeah, pat yourself on the back and feel like you did something good, maybe.
Exactly, yeah.
What we landed on, too, was actually a compromise from where this discussion initially began. As someone who, if you followed me on Twitter, you know, I love a Massachusetts Gaming Commission meeting. I followed a lot of these, and I can kind of give you a little bit of a backstory on this. There is one commissioner of the 5 that was driving this. Her name is Eileen O'Brien. Really exceptional. I love her as a regulator. But on this one, she wanted more than what we really landed on, which is she wanted to take some sort of steps to stop Fanatics, Barstool, I think those are really the 2, but potentially other operators who come into the space and use their brand that is more than just a sports book to appeal to minors and say, oh, well, it's not the sports book side of the business. It's the media side of the business. It's the merchandise side of the business. And she wanted any sort of logo usage anywhere that was not specifically the sports book to have age gating on it. So in the instance of Massachusetts, DraftKings is based out of Boston. Under the proposed regulations, it would have to have like on the building, DraftKings 21 up. Nobody was really on board with this of the other commissioners. However, a version of this that they landed on as a compromise was to do it in stadiums. And even then, Chairwoman Kathy Judd-Stein voted against it and said she just felt like this was too much. And what you said kind of came up as a question, which is, what does this even accomplish? And we don't have any research to indicate that it does accomplish anything. Perhaps they'll give some research in the future, though.
Yeah, I guess with a lot of these measures, someone's got to move first in terms of introducing new things to see whether they work. But yeah, I just wonder about the efficacy. I mean, in O'Brien's original proposals, surely putting 21 plus on the Fanatics merchandise store only draws eyes closer to the sports betting side of the business anyway, because, Fanatics is such a bigger brand outside of sports betting. I mean, it's not even touched the surface in sports betting just yet, that putting 21 plus on the next to the logo would just indicate that it is moving into sports betting, and that would potentially move the eyes of those young people towards the sports book.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like if I'm trying to put myself in kids' shoes again, I would probably question why it says that on the sign and draw more attention to it. Again, I haven't been to a soccer match or anything, but U.S. sports, there's ads everywhere, all over the place when you go to a ballpark, that I feel like I'm so inundated with it, I don't even really pay attention to what's out there, that I question what this really accomplishes. The other thing that really is interesting is it sets an unusual precedent, not just for sports betting, but for the fact that casinos have been advertising at these properties and venues for years with no age gating information on them. Alcohol is rampant at these things, and it's not all over the place that you need to be 21 in order to drink it, that I don't know why we suddenly care so much more about sports betting than another form of gambling or alcohol. I assume over in Europe, it's the same kind of thing. There's just ads everywhere, and this isn't really something you would see.
Yeah, we're absolutely inundated with adverts in sports grounds. I mean, we'll keep it within the medium of sports grounds for now. Everywhere, pitch side perimeters, there's adverts. The players' shirts have got gambling companies on the front of them, on the sleeves, plastered on the actual concourses themselves. In some of the stadiums, they've got gambling companies' brands on them, and yeah, nowhere does it say you have to be 18 or over to gamble. I think it's slightly different if you change the medium. So if you're advertising on TV, for example, in the UK, they would always say 18 plus, or like, please gamble responsibly, and have those kinds of messages, but not necessarily in the grounds themselves.
Well, I think too, and this was a big debate within the MGC, there is a big difference between an advertisement, which includes a call to action or looking at the offerings of a specific sports book, and something as simple as a logo slap. And again, that was something that was debated by the MGC, where to some, there is a big difference, and to O'Brien, there wasn't as much. And I will say, at the heart of what she was saying, and I appreciate what she was getting at, which is, she wants the Fanatics and the Barstools of the world to have to lean into a separate brand for sports betting, where it's Barstool Sportsbook, it's Fanatics Sportsbook. And her concern stemmed from, well, if you're just going to call yourself Fanatics and be a sports book and use all of this appeal that you have in other realms where Fanatics is a thing, or Barstool with the media and the pizza and the food and the everything, then you need to have a separate brand, and you don't get to benefit from having this broader brand that brings in underage people, which I get. I just question. It feels like they really, I believe actually Judd Stein said, we really want to give you a win on this one, Commissioner O'Brien. And this was just done to make it feel like they had done something versus completely let the issue go.
Yeah, like you said at the top, O'Brien has been at the forefront of making sure these kinds of measures are implemented in Massachusetts, and probably one of the most high-profile regulators in the country in terms of these measures. So I feel like for the commission or the rest of the commission to ignore her every move would undermine her position a little bit. So maybe just giving her a win in some area does, it gives her a win.
Yeah. Another issue that she cared quite a bit about was Jake Paul being at the front of Better. And when Better came before the MGC, she was one of the more active commissioners questioning whether his fan base and who he appeals to is problematic because there are so many young people that know him from his Disney Channel days. I have to wonder if she paid attention to something that happened in your neck of the woods, Charlie, with the Advertising Standards Authority in UK regarding Jake Paul in a sports book. What happened over there?
So the ASA, for people who don't know, is a self-regulatory body made up of the advertising industry in the UK. It doesn't particularly have much regulatory bite in terms of it can't give too much like enforcement action. It can refer those who flout its standards onto Ofcom, who is the broadcasting regulator and the trading standards. But yeah, Entain's one of Entain's flagship brands, Ladbrokes, was sort of reprimanded by the ASA for an advert that it put out on social media featuring Jake Paul, because it could appeal to minors. And I think this whole thing stems from his time on the Disney Channel, which is prominent in the UK, but I think more broadly, his YouTube career, which has exploded in the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, I'm not terribly familiar with his content, but I know he's very popular with sort of the teenage crowd. And
you don't strike me as a Jake Paul kind of guy, Charlie. I gotta say.
No. But Ladbrokes had put a tweet out about, and it was a poll on Twitter about what does Jake Paul do with his boxing career next. And they said the ASA said that this could appeal to minors, and so forwarded them on to Ofcom.
I'm kind of surprised that this is considered even advertising, because there was nothing in it that was come bet on Ladbrokes about it or tying back to it. Was purely just to generate engagement to their following. Hey, what do you think Jake Paul's going to do after losing this boxing match? It wasn't what are the odds. It wasn't anything. So, I mean, I'm not as familiar with the ASA. Do they tend to be fairly liberal in determining that ads or tweets are not allowed or out of bounds of what they should be?
I think they tend to care about things if they attract youngsters or minors a lot more than other things. And I think they're quite harsh on gambling in general. But like I said earlier, they don't particularly have any authority to do anything after that other than refer Ladbrokes onto other agencies who can maybe impose fines or tell them to take the content down or whatever. But yeah, I think generally they err on the side of caution with these things and tend to tell advertisers to reel in their actions sometimes.
Yeah, so over here, we have an AGA marketing code of conduct. We have the Responsible Sports Betting Marketing Coalition. But with those, they are very specific with their metrics. You need to prove that X percentage of your audience is of this age. And if you can do that, or you cannot, someone kind of needs to show, hey, X percentage is under 18 or 21. And then those people become off limits. They actually showed, Ladbrokes provided a breakdown of Jake Paul's social media following. 13% of Instagram users were 13 to 17, 16% of YouTube users were 13 to 17, 18% of users on TikTok were under 18, and on Twitter, Paul has age gated to 18 plus. So these come nowhere near the percentages that you would want the AGA to meet a threshold. We're talking, I think it's like 45% for the AGA. That it's interesting to me that, I guess when you multiply that out across his following, it is a large number of under 18-year-olds, but when you're talking about it as a percentage, it doesn't feel that egregious.
So for me, I think you mentioned the AGA's marketing code there. The ASA is the advertising nationwide across all industries. This isn't a gambling only thing. So these aren't, the people on the board aren't gambling experts. They aren't they're not specialists in the online betting and gaming space. But yeah, I mean, I take your point that you look at those numbers and you probably say, well, hang on a minute, that it's not like he's still a Disney star and he's most famous for being a Disney star. However, I think his YouTube career and then his brother Logan Paul releasing the Prime energy drink last year with KSI, I think KSI is probably one of the most influential stars amongst under 18s in the UK. And so by association, he will have appeal with under 18s as well. So I can see where they're coming from.
I mean, I'll be honest. I'm curious. I think of LeBron James or Steph Curry, or I'm trying to think of Justin Bieber. And I would assume most of them, these percentages are probably comparable to how many people they have in that age category. I'll be honest, I kind of expected it to be higher given what we know about Jake Paul and given the fact that everyone my age thinks this guy's a toolbox. It's surprising to me that it's sub 15%, sub 20% of his audience. I truly thought it would be more.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I genuinely would have thought it would have been higher. And I think the context as well is really important here. It's not like they said, here are the odds on Jake Paul's next fight. It was just a social media manager trying to get hit his engagement targets for that week, and it's not going to have any material negative impact on minors gambling in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I'll read what they said. We noted the cap guidance stated that a sports person who was involved in a sport that had a limited following of under 18s, but was particularly well known for their social media activity and media profile, in particular through involvement in youth culture-related areas such as fashion and music, would be more likely to be of strong appeal to under 18s. And we considered that because Jake Paul had such a large number of followers that were under 18, he was of inherent strong appeal to under 18s. So in this case, it was less about the percentages and more about the fact that, well, when you have 4 million followers, or however many, and 10% of them are under 18, that is 400,000 people. So that's a problem. I get the scope of it. I don't believe that this is enough to meet the muster of anything on the U.S. side of things. Hell, we gave this guy a sports book. I don't think that this is going to fly necessarily in the U.S. But do you see, we've seen a lot of what happened in the UK happen in the U.S. later on down the line. Do you think that we ever see this in the United States, that this kind of incident draws this kind of reaction?
I think the sensible solution is somewhere in between. Giving him a sports book, but also, blasting Ladbrokes over this tweet. Also, I think I'll be somewhere in the middle. I don't think this will necessarily be a thing in the US. I think there would be a lot of freedom of expression.
I mean, we saw Barstool paraded out the First Amendment and it's can't lose parlay. I just can't imagine any sports books being okay with this kind of censorship. We're Americans. We need to be able to say what we want to say, I suppose. I honestly, my bigger concern with Jake Paul is that, he got fined by the SEC for like fraud and promoting a cryptocurrency. That seems like a bigger deal than having 10% of your account be children, but what do I know? All right, coming up, what's going on SBC Americas? Anything people should be on the lookout for?
Oh, later today, we've got the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission who are going to deliberate and potentially finalise regulations on sports betting. So I'm sure you'll be there, Jess.
I don't think finalise. I think they're just putting out what that usually it's temp regs that then operators have a chance to give a feedback to that they then finalize. But we will hopefully see regs today. And y'all, Jess is going on a field trip because it is probably 15 minutes from my house where this meeting is. So I will be in attendance for that and writing it up live. I will also be at the Nickel G's conference at the end of the week in Denver with regulators, legislators, and potentially Eileen O'Brien, who might be giving me dirty looks after today's podcast. So you can keep an eye out for that as well. In the meantime, we will see you next time on iGaming Daily.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Barcelona, being held at the Fira Barcelona Montjuic on the 19th to the 21st of September. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.